Casser-Jayne Show. Let's talk. And I am Halli Casser-Jayne. Welcome to my listeners in the United States and around the world. It's so nice to have you here. Tune in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show at hallicasserjayne.com. This week on the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, I bring you two intriguing guests, both who have written fascinating memoirs. Memoirs, as Irish writer Frank Harris once said, are a well-known form of fiction. He was kidding, of course, right? Joining me at my table today, the always delightful Irish-American actor, writer, politician, and the author of a both hilarious and insightful new memoir, Death Need Not Be Fatal, Malachy McCourt. And in our second half hour, I talk with the astute and charming model, actress, writer, Fiona Lewis, the author of a dishy new memoir, Mistakes Were Made, Some in French. Wisdom, humor, Hollywood dirt, great conversation on the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Let's get to it. Before his brother wrote Angela's Ashes, Malachy was the famous McCourt. While Frank struggled in obscurity as a New York City public school teacher, Malachy was a bon vivant actor, saloon owner. He practically invented the singles bar, was a pioneer in talk radio, my kind of guy, a soap opera star, a best-selling author, a gold smuggler? Well, we'll have to ask him about that, and about his political activism and his candidacy for governor of the state of New York. A well-respected raconteur, the professional Irishman was once a regular on The Tonight Show. Now the last of Angela's children, he fancies himself a bit of an expert on death. Death, the subject of his latest book, Death Need Not Be Fatal. But not to worry, no Grim Reaper here. Death Need Not Be Fatal is at once hilarious, eye-opening, smart, impudent, poignant, a memoir as a primer on living life to the fullest, and death, be it ever so proud. Let's talk. All right, listen to me. I'm so thrilled to have you here. You're an Irishman through and through. Only an Irishman could do a 259-page riff on death. I'm telling you, right? It makes... It's true. Let me finish before you answer, because I think you'll get a kick out of what I'm about to say. It made me laugh. It made me cry. It made me want to scream. It made me rant, rave, applaud. And I know a lot of people would say to you, look, you're just a great storyteller. What's with you and the Irish and great storytelling? That's not what I'm going to ask you. I'm going to say to you, why are the Irish such great purveyors of emotion?
What's the question again, Halli?
Why are you guys so good at emotion? You make us laugh, you make us cry. What is it in the Irish culture that trains you to be able to play on people's emotions the way that you do, beautifully?
It's so that you won't be looking at me.
Ah, that's interesting.
Take the attention away from yourself, you see. And that way weave stories and you put them out on the horizon. And in that way people won't be looking at you see. Because we're essentially, it's a question of low self-esteem. So you weave a story that has nothing to do with you, and off you go. And the weaving of the story is that there is, English essentially is Ireland's second language, although English has been with us for quite a few centuries. But essentially underneath it is we do have our own language, which is the Gaelic. And it's a very poetic and unrealistic language filled with imagery and poetry and words of vision. And here we are using this language, which is dull, and it's a very dull language. And somebody said that the Irish take the best advantage of the English language. They court it like a beautiful woman. They make it bray with donkey laughter. They fling it at the sky like paint pots full of rainbow colors. Then they make it chant the dirge of man's fate, of man's follies, like a soft rain falling over the barren earth. They have paid the oppressor the supreme compliment of taking his language and turning it to sorcery. So there we are. That's what we've done. And we'll never use one word where 100 will do.
You're my kind of people. That's all I have to say. I just love it. Listen, and you know what's going to happen to me? I'm going to sit here and I'm not going to say a word because I'm just going to say, just talk for half an hour. I just want to listen to you just go on and on and on and on and on. You are really such a character. I mean, it's really true. You say something in this book that just cracked me up. I never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And then you also say, say that a lie is just a dream that might come true. So let me take those two statements, okay, and say this to you. You also do something rare. You're funny, you're humorous. That's true, right? But what you really are is witty, and there's a difference, and you know that difference, right?
I am not sure. Again, Haley, it's that defensive thing, using words to fend off life. Because people have often said to me, "You are a terrible liar." I say, "I'm not. I'm very good at it. I am the best you ever came across. I'm so practiced at telling lies. Don't tell me I'm a terrible liar. I'm expert at it." So no, let's go on from there.
Oh, God. So this title of this book, So Death Be Not Final, what the hell does that mean?
Fatal.
Fatal. What is that? Yes, right.
Yes,
what did I say? Final?
Not final.
Yeah. No, death be not fatal. What does that mean?
It means that we really don't die. I mean, it's not within my purview. I mean, particularly here in America, the avoidance of it's quite interesting that you go to an undertaker, they talk about in your hour of need. And when people talk to me about their folks dying, they tell me they didn't die. They pass away, they pass on, they leave us. No longer with us, with the Lord in God's arms, with the angels, beneath the sod, kicked the bucket, bought the farm, and it goes on and on, deceased. And the one I love is repose. They're in repose. Here's some terrible bastard in life, and he dies, and they say he's reposing. I'd say if there is a hell, usually they're there getting the devils poking them with hot pokers and pitchforks and things like that. So anyway, and then of course he passed. What? And who's going to clean it up? That's the thing.
I'm telling you, I'm just going to sit here and shut up because you just keep talking to me. I love it. I mean, you're cracking me up. But that's wit. You see, there's the difference. I mean, there are funny jokes, there are funny stories, and there's all of that. But to be able to do what you do, that's something quite unique. And you need to know that. If you don't understand the difference between the two, I'm telling you, there is a difference. You know, you had this hard...
Well, that's a very good definition there. I like that, Halli. And I find that as a rule, I don't like jokes. They really are mostly boring, you know, and people do tell them, when somebody prefaces something with, "Did you hear the one about that?" Right. I immediately go to sleep. But I like a good repost on a comment, on a remark, on something that you're talking about. I don't mind that. Or a good story well told is good. But jokes, you know that things happen in threes, and it's so boring. And so I try to tell people, "Did you hear the one about the..." I've heard them all. Please don't. Put me to sleep with a joke, you know.
I hear you, but you know, that tells me two things about you. One is you have a great sense of irony, and I do think that that's key, and you see it all. And that probably comes from the hardscrabble childhood. But the other one is, besides irony, I think that you also have intellect. And I think those two things are what make people great storytellers, be they lies or not.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Of course, it is that, as you know, we are a peculiar species, and that is it. 100% mortality rate, and there's some kind of a joke there. I don't know whether it's a higher joke in the terms of the mystical or the religious. But when we look at, people are always talking about death as the end of something, and it is. Mark Twain said that he was around for millions of years before he was born, and he'll be around millions of years after he dies. So life is an interruption of death. You know, they're always talking about death being an interruption of life, because we'll be around far longer dead than alive. And then I am, of course, at ease with the whole bloody thing, because I don't have religious beliefs. And religion is like, organized religion is much the same as organized crime, without the compassion of organized crime. Because organized crime only shoots you in the leg if you don't come up with the money, Whereas organized religion, if you don't do what the mafia chief in the sky tells you, this is the way you do things, and if you do it the right way, you can come up here and sit forever looking at my right earlobe, or I'm going to put you down there where it's extremely hot. Now, with the low price of coal these days, I think that the hell place will go on forever. But I'm perfectly at ease then, as I am often say. I'm an atheist, thank God, and that keeps me free of any ideological fears. And all organized religion is inculcation of fear. I remember as a Catholic, a brought-up Catholic, if you ate a sausage on Friday, that was it for eternity. Pitchforks up your arse forever and ever and ever. And just because you ate a sausage on Friday, ate meat on Friday. Absolutely absurd. All those rules and regulations. And I think that I think I did. Why? That was ecclesiastical terrorism. I was in terror of dying when I was a kid, that I was going to go there to that hot place.
There's a story that you tell in the book, but I'm not going to tell it on air, but it begins with the M word so that you know what I'm talking about, and maybe the rest of the audience will have to go and read this book to find out how absolutely hilarious you are and funny you are about how you feel about the church. I was going to actually ask you if being Catholic is a badge to wear with an honor or an affliction, but I'm going to ask you the same question about being Irish. Is it a badge to wear, or is it an affliction?
It's, well, the thing about being Irish is that there are a couple of racial assumptions that, and racist, I would say, too. Racial and racist. There's an assumption that one is Catholic because one is Irish. Then there's another assumption that we are heavy drinkers because we are Irish. And then here's the interesting thing about language. If a Brit speaks well, hello, likes to see you, delighted to see you, and you speak like that, you say. If you speak that you're severely having a severe bowel movement or something, they say you're eloquent. Whereas the Irish, if we have any way with the language at all, they say, oh, you have the gift of the gab, or you must have kissed the Blarney Stone, giving no credit at all for this love that we have. Generally speaking, many Irish people do have a love of the word. And it's interesting that biblically that it says, in the beginning was the word. But first came the Irish, that's what I say. And away we go with it. And John Millington Synge said that words in a play should have the texture of a crisp autumn apple. You should be able to feel the words coming out between your teeth, and you could take great joy and then and again toss them in the sky like rainbows, full of rainbow colors,
which is
and let them float down.
And that's what you do. That's what you do. You were a gold smuggler? What?
I was. I was having a very bad time, and my marriage had broken up, and I was doing the Irish thing. What the Irish supposed to do, drinking very heavily, and I didn't care about living or dying. I didn't care about much really. And I met a fella, and he said I'm not making fun of him now at all, but the man had a cleft palate. So he said, "Would you like to know and translated that, would you like to do a job that involves travel? And of course I was yesing to him. I'd go anywhere, do anything at the time. So he got me a ticket. We went out to the airport and we traveled off to Zurich. And then he came to my hotel room there, bearing a huge a suitcase. And it was full of gold bars, 20 kilos, 2.2 pounds. Then he whipped out this garment, which was a kind of a corset thing with 20 pockets in it, and put it around the bod. I was a bit suspicious at first when he had me take off my shirt. I thought he might be wanting to get familiar with me, but it wasn't. You know, he was a businessman. So we put the 20 kilos into the thing, and I left Zurich, went to Rome, And then he said, when you get to take these, take them Bombay, and when you get to Bombay, tell them that your name is Haji Khan, call them up, and they will tell you what to do. So I said, well, call up he and the McCourt Trading Company, tell them you're Haji Khan, and they will tell you what to do. So I called the McCourt Trading Company, and I tell them I'm Haji Khan, and they will tell me what to do. That's right. So anyway, I went to Rome and then got drunk and got out to the airport, missed the plane to Bombay, which was very fortunate because the bloody thing crashed. And with everybody on board, and crashed in the Bay of Bombay, Alitalia. So anyway, I caught the next one the following Wednesday, and I got to Bombay, and I was calling up McCourt Trading Company, and there was no answer, because I didn't realize there was 4 days of the Hare Krishna celebration, and they take off from work, and there's no work done. So finally, I got it. I had to call from the railway station because they told me not to use the hotel phone because they're always listening in. So anyway, I called up the McCourt Trading Company, and the voice said, McCourt Trading Company, what can I do for you, please? And I said, my name is Haji Khan. Yes, sir. How can I help you? My name is Haji Khan. Yes, sir. How can I help you? My name is Haji Khan. I know. How can I help? I said, I was told to call up and say my name is Haji Khan, and you would tell me what to do. How can I help you, sir, if I do not know the nature of your business? So now I'm silenced. What the hell am I going to do if this guy doesn't understand this? So then I said, Haji Khan. Oh, Mr. Khan, why did you not say so? So I had to put on the voice with the cleft palate. So that was it.
Oh, you're such a crazy man. What a story and what a life you guys have led. Honest to God, it's just extraordinary to me. You're a soothsayer. You are. You predicted, God help us, that Donald Trump was going to be president. Give me a break.
Oh. Well, I know that the more people sing, they're always singing, God bless America and so forth. And we have enough in this country, really. So this God guy gets really annoyed. You have enough. So he sent us Donald Trump as a curse and as a penance for a while. So there we are. I call him the groper in chief.
No, so do I. What a character, right? Can you believe we're living? Now, you've lived long enough and through enough. Can you ever remember a time in this country quite like this one?
It's Grope the Pope week. That's what he's declared. He just went to see it. Good Lord. Poor America.
It's true.
And there it is.
It's true.
But anyway, again, we have gone through an awful lot in this marvelous, amazing. You can't, of course you can't. I say you can't love a country. You have to love people. And the people are marvelous and compassionate. And when they are fooled by this, the Trump foolery, I call them conservatives. Is what they are.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to steal it, and I'm not going to tell anybody where it came from.
Go for it. You don't have to. No attribution if you don't.
No
feel
attribution.
Like it,
I'll always give you attribution. Always.
It's so true, though, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Listen, speaking of Donald Trump, you've crossed paths with people. A lot of people like me would have loved to have known over the years. I mean, and some of the people come to mind: Bill Clinton, Jack Paar, Merv Griffin, Elliot Spitzer, John Wayne, Kirk Douglas, your good friend Richard Harris. I'm going to say to you as an Irishman, I'm going to say a name, and I want you to give me the first and only word that comes to mind. Can you do that? Or are you going to have to embellish? Let's try it. I'm curious to see what you thought of these people. Bill Clinton.
Charming.
Jack Paar.
Inscrutable.
Well, you're good at this. Okay. Merv Griffin.
Evasive.
Elliot Spitzer.
Sock lover. He kept his socks on when he made love.
I know. I'm just, oh my God. John Wayne.
Shameless.
Kirk Douglas.
Decent.
Richard Harris.
Snobbish.
Malachy McCourt.
Grand.
I'm in love. You tell your wife I'm in love.
My beloved Diana, 52 years. I love
unbelievable.
Her dearly, and I tell her that every day.
I'm telling you, but you tell her she's got competition. I'm coming. I'm taking you away. You're the last. Yeah, I'm taking you away. You're the last of your generation. You survived.
I'm the last of my of the seven. Yeah,
the seven McCourts.
Yeah.
And you've survived all of your siblings, and I know you hate the word siblings, but that was the easiest word to talk about, to say.
Yeah.
So is that a good thing or a bad thing? I mean, one thing it allows you is that you get the last laugh, no?
I do. Well, I don't know if it's the last laugh or the last word or what it is. My brother Mike, my two brothers, they were all of them with the exception of Frank were younger than me. And Frank was 1 year, 1 month, and 1 day older. And Mike said that he was going to write a book when we were all dead. And so he didn't make it. And Frank said he was going to speak at my funeral, and he didn't make it. And Alfie just lay down there some months back for a nap, and he just died without. And Mike, a little while ago, I had a monitor put in because I was having problems. So they called me up and told me my heart had stopped in the morning for 10 seconds. I didn't know I had died. And I woke up and they put in one of those, what do you call those beat counters?
A pacemaker.
A pacemaker, right. I'm 85, so I'm losing it.
No, I don't think you're losing it at all.
Muy rapidamente, as we say in the original Gaelic.
You're not losing it.
My heart was stopped for 10 seconds, and they showed it to me on the chart there. It was so funny to see where it went flat. And I don't know where I went in those 10 seconds, but anyway, I wasn't aware of it for some reason. So anyway, that was fun. So anyway, you're talking to a man who survived death. Death, where is thy sting? The graves of hell, the bells of hell go ting-a-ling-a-ling. For you, but not for me. Oh, death, where is thy sting-a-ling-a-ling? Our grave, thy victory. St. Paul to the Corinthians.
Oh, my God. First of all, let me also say this to you. You're the only person that I know who could write a book about death, which is the primer to living. You hear me?
I do, yeah.
It freaked me out.
It is, yeah. Isn't it living a day at a time, because that's all we have? All the rest is just, if you have 1 foot in the future and 1 foot in the past, you're pissing on the present. So that's what people do. They're always looking to the future, and they say, stay out of the future. It's a very slippery place. And there are a lot of folks, and I am an alcoholic, so I haven't had a drink in 32 years. I don't drink because I never drink when I'm sober. That's what it is. But if you want to say in that program that I belong to, if you want to give your God a good laugh, tell him your future plans. And that's it. And I don't. I have no plans for the future at all. What I'm doing right now is I'm talking to you. And I'm having a marvelous time because you're receptive, you've got a good mind, and you have an appreciation of words. You use them well yourself. You're on the radio. We're chatting. We don't know who's listening to us, but we might be, in a way, giving some people who's gone through a rotten time in life, we might be able to give them a laugh today, maybe remove their fear of mortality. So many people, they don't know what to do with themselves on a wet Sunday afternoon, and they want to live forever. Good Lord, knock it off. Just take today. That's it. And if you're having troubles, just think about the guy in the White House and what he needs. I think what we should do is send that guy tons and tons of laxatives. And then he can go and do what he needs to do and get out of the White House.
You lost me. Absolutely perfect. Do you hear me? Absolutely perfect. Now listen to me. I have my thing on life. I guess that's why I fell in love with you. And tell Diana, there's this woman in the air who is in love with me. But the reason I fell in love, because life is to be gulped. not sipped. That's my rule. And you know what? It's so interesting to read somebody else who clearly sees life the same way as I do. That's what it's about. You know, what's the old line about? You only come around this way once, as far as we know. As far as I know. As far as we know.
I know, but there are, statistically now, I'm not sure if this is correct, but 5 billion people have died, according to, and there's 7 billion alive, right? Now, that I don't know, they talk about reincarnation. That means somebody has to come back twice, or 1.5, right? Because 5 billion dead, if they're coming back, then where did the 7 billion come from? And then they say that, I don't know how many are in hell and how many are in heaven. I don't know what maybe it's half and half. But then you're supposed to sit there gazing at God's right earlobe. That they say that's happiness. So, but if you're sitting, and all the good people, they sit at the right hand of God, they say. And so they have to look left. And there over on the other side, on the left, is myself and Karl Marx. And all the other commies, you see. And that must really piss them off, that they have to look like, that must be hell, to have to look left. For eternity.
I'm telling you what, right? Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. And then there's 12. Do you know, really makes me laugh. Do you know that heaven is 1,400 square miles? That's the measurements of it. Heaven is, right? And there is 12 gates with 12 angels guarding it, and 12 foundation stones with the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. Very high wall. Now, I wonder to keep out Mexicans, I think. Right? Heaven has, and I don't know who, but where did they get the idea of walls? I mean, this guy, now he's walls. There's, what's his name? Reagan is over there in Berlin. Tear down this wall, and this other guy wants to build them. Can't they make up their bloody minds?
Not when they're Republicans.
Build your wall or tear it. Just don't be having walls at all, you know.
I'm with you.
Just leave them out of our lives.
I'm with you, right. And don't separate.
All we need is the wall between church and state. That's the one I like the best. And they keep that one high for me, and that's good.
Listen, before we close, 2 questions. If you had a tombstone, and you want to be cremated, I know. But so if you had a tombstone, what do you want it to read?
He made us laugh.
That's easy. Yep. Okay. And I have one last question for you. Actually, I have 2. I don't know if we have the time for it. But the one is, I just want to tell you the train story. You and that train. I loved that story.
Yes.
More than anything else. Oh, my gosh. That just tore me apart. But here's my one last thing. Will you share your recipe for mashed potatoes?
I will. You take 4 mashed potatoes. You boil them. And then you put in some olive oil. You put in some, and the secret, some olive oil, a bit of butter or a bit of a substitute for that, a little salt, little pepper, and a large tablespoonful of horseradish. And you put in yogurt. And that's it. Mash them up. And a drop of milk, and off you go. And you will live forever.
You know that every day at 4 o'clock I have a teaspoon of horseradish in V8 juice. Every day, 4 o'clock. Been doing it for years, and I'm going strong. It must work. So it's that horseradish thing. Listen, I want you to tell Diana. Will you do this for me? Tell her she brought you up well.
I will indeed. Yes. Thank you so much, love.
Had a ball. Thank you. Great book.
It was a delight to talk to you.
You too.
Blessings on your cranium a day at a time, and live every day as if it's going to be your last, because one day you'll be right.
I love you. I'm sending you a kiss. Love. Bye.
Bye.
I've been speaking with Malachy McCourt. His book is Death Need Not Be Fatal. For more information on Mr. McCourt and his book, visit Amazon.com. You were listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. My guests today are Malachy McCourt, the author of Death Need Not Be Fatal, and Fiona Lewis, author of Mistakes Were Made, Some in French. Tune in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show at hallicasserjayne.com. We'll be back in a minute. Stay with us.
A message from the American Podcast Council.
Hey, everybody, gather around the piano.
All right. Hey, what you listening to? Podcasts. How can I listen to podcasts?
Here, let me show you real fast.
It's easier than baking a cake.
Well, I should hope so.
Hey, you know there's nothing on earth like a genuine, bona fide, electrified 3-part podcast?
Yeah.
That's right. And it seems today, in our troubled world, most people don't know what a podcast is.
No.
It's true, but you know. Got one in your ear right now.
Sure do.
So please, help me out. Show your friends and neighbors how to cast a pod.
Okay.
Then tell the world about your favorite show using hashtag tripod. That's TRYPOD with a capital T and that rhymes with P, and you know what that stands for.
Podcast.
Hashtag tripod. That's TRY pod.
Model, actress, writer, Fiona Lewis has led the life of which dreams are made. Smart, savvy, beautiful. Her acting credits include Roman Polanski's The Vampire Killers, Ken Russell's Listomania, and Brian De Palma's The Fury. She's the author of the novel Between Men. Her writing has appeared in The New Yorker, The Observer, and the Los Angeles Times. And she may be, which she candidly admits, the only woman in America who has written for The New Yorker and posed for Playboy. One marriage didn't work, one has, but then, just when life seemed to be singing along famously, Fiona Lewis woke up one morning asking herself that proverbial question songstress Peggy Lee once asked, "Is that all there is?" She answers her own questions in her new, dishy, and candid memoir, Mistakes Were Made, Some in French. Let's talk.
Hi there.
Hi there. I'm just fine, thank you very much. And how are you?
Well, I'm doing great, thank you.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. Thanks for being on the show. Thank you for this lovely, lovely, important book. I think it's very important. Let me set it up for the listeners. First of all, let me say this. Isn't life a beautiful bitch? I mean, it really is. One day, right? It's the truth. One day you wake up and there it is demanding that you hit that midlife thing and it's going, reassess, make some tough choices.
And do something.
And do something. Been there, done that. I'm right along with you. But you begin the book when you seemingly have it all. You're living in beautiful La La Land with your beautifully successful husband, Art Linson, an American film producer. Let's give him some credit, right? Director, screenwriter.
Right.
The Untouchables, one of my favorite movies, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And then you become aware that life just isn't all that beautiful. So tell us about the beginning of this. Listen to me. Beautiful adventure of self-discovery. The first thing you noticed that what was gone was your sense of optimism?
Yes, that's right. And I couldn't pin it down to anything because, as you say, I had everything. My life was perfect. So why was I depressed? Why couldn't I get out of bed in the morning? And I felt quite guilty about, having this lovely life when you consider other people's. And then I started to think, well, it seems to me that everything that was going to happen to me has happened already. And what am I going to do with myself? Who am I? You can't rest on your laurels and say, well, I used to be an actress. I used to be this. And I was also having problems with my career as a writer. I didn't feel confident anymore. And so I thought, well, what am I going to do? I have to reinvent myself somehow. I can't give up because I'm in my 50s. I've probably got a few decades to go. So by chance, I happened to go and stay with a friend of mine who has a farmhouse in southwest France, which is a rather unknown area. Not at all, not expensive, not chic. And I realized that I could actually buy a ruin there for not very much money. And I suddenly saw this as a project to reinvent myself, to give myself self-worth and see if I could do it, basically. It was a big challenge.
I love this story. Can I just tell you, I love this. I'm pea green with envy. I did a 1767 farmhouse once, but not in the south of France.
Oh.
So listen to me.
Oh.
Right. Well, we can talk about that another time. The story of the renovation of the chateau and your life, they coordinate. They go together. It's together. It's a renovation of life, a renovation of this beautiful, beautiful farmhouse or country chateau, really. But before we get into that, I want to go back to your beginnings because they're fascinating too, and I think we are our prelude, right?
Yes.
You were born in Westcliff-on-Sea. Boy, that's such a sexy name, in Essex, England. It sounds dreamy.
It wasn't very sexy.
I know, but
It was a sweet little seaside town, a sleepy little seaside town.
It's a dreamy town. You're sort of dreamy. You're a dreamer. You're creative. A lady of big ideas. How'd that get into your bones?
I have no idea, because I have to say in those days in England, my family were very English, and it was not done to encourage your children too much in case they were spoiled, which we certainly weren't terribly. So you really had to find your own way. And I must say, though, my mother was very creative. She was, she was one of those wives who made dresses out of curtains and made do and made everything herself. So I was creative. I just didn't have a clue what I could possibly be. And maybe, I don't know, by going to London and becoming a model and sharing an apartment with Jackie Bisset, and then sort of slipping into acting, which it was all very vague. In those days you could actually sort of slip into acting from being a model. I don't think you can do that anymore. And then I was always writing. I was writing poetry, and so I obviously had this artistic bent. I just had no idea how to channel it. I think these days one's parents would have immediately put one somewhere and to expand that. But in those days, girls were really thought of as still, you get married and have children, and that'll be fine.
Right.
And so those were the days.
Times changed, though, and I want to talk to you about this, because I know you went to boarding school in France,
right.
And France touched you, I guess, in a way that the UK didn't. Why?
Well, but I first of all, I felt completely liberated. I went there to University of Grenoble, which is a town at the foot of the French Alps. And I went, can you believe I was sent there on my own at 16? But I was, and I was supposed to be looked after by this woman in a pension with other students, but of course she didn't really care. We could do what we liked. So it really was a complete freedom. I didn't speak French, but I got a French boyfriend, and I didn't bother really to go to school. And I mean, it really was an awakening, and also in something about the French language. And I'd also been on holiday with my parents to Saint-Tropez when I was a child. I had this affinity with France that I didn't really realize, but I did, and somehow I blossomed, and I always dreamed of going back to France, even though I went in a different direction.
I'm going to have to change the way I say France to France, because I sound like a lousy, rotten American with no class.
You're right, it took France. But there's something about the language and
It's
the
true.
history of France that appealed to me, and the food. And you can imagine, if you've grown up in the countryside in England, raining every day. And also in those days, the food was pretty bad. And then you go to France, and suddenly it's completely different. I mean, even my childhood in Saint-Tropez, suddenly just sitting in the sun for a start and drinking coffee and croissant. I mean, it was just very exotic compared to growing up in a small town in England.
It's interesting to me, because one of the things I got in reading the book is that you see things, and what you see, you sort of make happen in your way. And that fascinates me when there are people like that in the world. And I have a lot of friends like that who do that, but not everybody does. So there's something instilled in you, that you carried France with you, and then what? How many years later you make the dream come true, but it had been instilled in you as a child. So I think that's interesting, Dr. Halli says. Beautiful. Go ahead. If you
sorry.
Yeah,
yes,
no.
I think that, here's what I think looking back, is that when you're young, if you can travel with your parents and open your horizons, it's really important for a child, because you do live in this tiny world of where you grow up, in your house and your schools, and it just gives you a much better understanding of the world and other people's situation and languages. And I think that it's a great education if you can travel, and show your children things.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Widening the horizon is key to it all. It also takes the fear out. It takes borders out of your life symbolically, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's so important. You don't have prejudice against other people. You see the world as made up of all sorts of races and different habits. And so I think that is very important. You're right.
So listen to me, Fiona. You were also given a great gift. You are stunning, darling, even today. I'm going to say it. It's a fact. It's quite a right. Did you recognize your beauty as your single greatest asset? What did you consider it an asset? Did you even come to think of it in terms of, I am beautiful?
No. when I was younger, here's what's interesting. I didn't get on very well with my mother, not through any fault of hers, which I realized later, but she was not a very encouraging I don't think she ever told me I was pretty or loved me, but that was very British, and I didn't really think much of it. But if you don't have that instilled in you when you're young, that your self-worth and you are attractive and pretty as a girl and maybe smart, it's very difficult, because what happens is that you then look to be admired through men, which is not a good way to start out as a woman. You don't have any self-worth unless it's through a man telling you you're pretty or beautiful, which is not a good thing at all. So I didn't really think I thought I was, pretty, but lots and lots of pretty girls in London in the 60s, and I shared a bed sitter with Jacqueline Bisset, who wasn't bad herself.
You got to tell me about that. Tell the audience, because, the two of you together, what in the world?
It was funny. Here we were. We'd both come from the countryside, and in those days, even the smart parts of Chelsea had these sort of broken down houses that they'd loosely changed into flats, which meant the bathroom was one floor down and the phone was 3 floors down, so that by the time you got there it had run off, and so you could never get the phone call. And we, the little hot plate, it was really pretty sparse to live in. But, we didn't care. We were young and modeling, but we had no money whatsoever. We would literally toast pieces of bread in front of the electric fire, and, we lived on canned sardines. We had no money at all and no food, and you just, some nice guy would take you to dinner. It was very Spartan until then we sort of slid into movies, so we had a bit more money, and then Jackie moved to LA because she had a part in Bullet with Steve McQueen, which was kind of launched her career.
Amazing, right?
And
you, look what happens to you. I think it's hilarious what happens to you. Your film career, the beautiful Fiona winds up kind of being like the queen of vampire movies, horror
Queen
films.
Of the Bees, yes. I slid into these sort of horror movies. I found my niche, although I didn't really know what I was doing, but people seemed to like me as a scary girl, and I did all these pretty mediocre horror pictures. I did a couple of, at the time, Ken Russell, your audience probably wouldn't know who he was, but he was a big director, and he did a flashy movie called Listomania with Ringo Starr and Roger Daltrey of The Who, a sort of spoof on Franz Liszt, the composer. So I had a large part in that, and there were a couple of good movies, but you're right, I did become a sort of horror heroine.
It's hilarious to think of it, because you're such a stunning girl, as I said. Roman Polanski, talk to me about that, because that was your first part, right, in The Fearless Vampire Killers.
Right, my very first part was in The Fearless Vampire Killers, which, again, was a horror movie, but it was Roman Polanski, so it was his comic take on horror movies. I knew him when he'd just come over from France, and he didn't speak English very well, and we had an affair. And he was this young, extremely boyish. He looked incredibly young, enthusiastic, full of life, very intelligent, Polish man who had done a couple of movies in Poland and had won many awards. So he was very new and quite revered in London. And he gave me a small part as a serving maid in his horror movie, where I had a few lines which he literally taught me how to say every word, because I hadn't a clue what I was doing. But I parroted him and copied what he said, and I managed to pull them off. But on that movie was Sharon Tate, whom he met and fell in love with, and we were all friends at the time, and she was wonderful and quite magical, actually, as a person.
What about him? What's the key with him?
The thing with Roman is that he has this joie de vivre. He has all this energy for life and this enthusiasm, and he loves art and music and movies, and he's entranced by everything, and so you get sort of swept along. He is somebody who's, he's very boyish in that way, so that is attractive, and he's just, his energy is, it's attractive. A man who has that much energy and love for life, which he does. When you think of his background of how he lived in the streets in Poland because his parents were well, his mother at least was taken off to the concentration camp,
Right.
so he was an orphan in the street. But I didn't know that then, and so he was just this amazing, this sort of vital person. You know, he's like a young boy. He's not very tall, you know, but then he looked very young.
But it's interesting to me the people who you crossed paths with, and as we go along, we'll talk about some of the others, because that seeps into who you become, too. There's no way that it can't. I want to talk to you about something that you talk about in the book that I think is very courageous and very honest of you, and that's the 60s and how the rules changed for women. You're a little bit older than I am, but I mean, I came of age, suffered the same way that you did, and I think most of my girlfriends, in fact, I was just with some of my college friends recently, and we were talking about that. Women's lib, sexual freedom for girls, it was far more psychologically complicated time for young women than we ever talk about. And it needs to be talked about because, you know, people romanticize a lot of it and they celebrate a lot of it. But there was a price to be paid for it for young girls like you and myself in that. And mistakes were made. You talk about it. So talk to me a little bit more about that. Sexual freedom.
Well,
oh, boy.
What was interesting is, you know, the leap from the 50s to the 60s was enormous. I mean, it was very staid, the 50s, and then suddenly the 60s came along. And it's miniskirts and women and men are equal and free love. But basically it was all about sex. It was about everybody sleeping with everybody else, which we all pretended was groovy and cool. But deep down, you know, when you're 18 years old, and you don't know how to handle that. And it isn't sort of cool because, you know, you didn't get a guy calling you the next day. You didn't get any flowers. You got nothing. You just got, he was on to the next girl. And it didn't sit well. And yet you didn't like to mention it because you were supposed to be so cool. So we were all rather unhappy about it. And deep down, nothing much has changed. Everybody was looking for romance. But there wasn't much romance. There was a lot of free love and sex, but there wasn't a lot of romance. And also, there weren't a lot of drugs in those days. There was a lot of drinking because basically, just to kind of get through a one-night stand, you drank a lot. At least I did, and I was pretty miserable then. I felt completely lost, but I certainly didn't want to, you know, discuss it. And in those days, women, certainly not my women friends, you didn't talk about sex. It was very new. You didn't talk about the problems of relationships. Well, there wasn't even, the word relationship didn't even exist then. So it was tricky times. And
I think that's important to remember. And I also think that along with that, there are a lot of women who bear a lot of scars to that they either don't address, or they keep to themselves, or they only keep it to a very small amount of people. So I really wanted to touch on that with you, because I think that I haven't read that in any other book, a memoir that I've read of people of our, so to speak, generation. At the same time, though, my friend, you also posed nude for Playboy. Are you kidding? I would have died before I would have done that. What was that? What was that like?
Well, I'll tell you what. I came to America, and I came to do a movie, but it was sort of a few months ahead. And I had no money whatsoever. I actually came to California with $400, which, in my innocence, I thought, well, that'll do for a bit, you know. But of course, $400 didn't go a long way when you haven't got anywhere to live. So I had no money whatsoever, and they offered to. I said sure. And you know what? In a strange way, I didn't feel embarrassed about it at all. I wasn't nearly as embarrassed as everybody else who seemed to think for a nice girl from the English countryside this was a terrible thing to do. I didn't think so. And you know, in a way now, I am glad I did, because I don't have that body anymore. So I'm going, oh, well, you know, I really can't say that I was ever embarrassed, although I did notice men looked at me in a slightly different way.
No, I think it's fascinating. I really do. I mean, you know, but I think you have to have a certain self-worth in order to do that, too, or be completely off the wall.
But it was a certain recklessness, I think, yes.
Recklessness, okay, that's a good word to use.
Yes, I had a certain recklessness about it that I didn't really care what people thought. I don't know where that came from either, but it's good to have that to a degree, obviously, not, you know.
When you're young. When you're young. You certainly had your share of interesting men beyond who we've already talked about. Roger Vadim, which I think is hilarious, because everybody I talk to of late has a Roger Vadim story. I have a Roger Vadim story, but I'm going to tell you mine.
You do?
Yeah, but I'm not going to tell you mine. You were I don't want to talk about me. We'll talk about you. You were looking for love in all the wrong places, and if so, why?
I kept thinking, and it was that same thing that I mentioned before. I was looking for validation through a man, and so I was a bit of an easy mark. If some man said, "Oh my God, you're gorgeous. I've fallen madly in love with you," I was going, "Okay, I'm in." You know, it never occurred to me to think, and I think this is a problem that a lot of women have. What I thought about the man, only what he thought about me. I never asked myself, well, do I really like this guy? Is he the kind of guy I want to be with? And I didn't. I wanted that attention. I wanted that affection. And so I sort of skipped off to Paris with Roger Vadim, even though I knew really he probably had lots of other girlfriends. But he was good looking and he was seductive in that French way where he makes you feel for that minute that you are the only woman in the world. The French have a way of doing that. So I was captivated. And of course he was famous in France, and so, you know, people, you know, rushed over to him whenever he entered a restaurant. That's very attractive to a young girl, you know, that sort of power. But of course, it didn't last.
Well, you know, did it ever? I mean, those kind of things. But we'll go forward. No. You were looking to find the right place. I think that's obvious in your tale. But there was a line in the book I have to quote from your debonair Uncle Mike. I think it's the Brit version of what Jewish mothers like mine would say, which is, my mother would say, it's just as easy to marry a rich boy as a poor boy back in the day. And your Uncle Mike said, remember, a woman has a choice in life. You can either spend it on your knees scrubbing the kitchen floor, or you can spend it lying on the deck of a yacht in the south of France. Yours to decide. I love that line.
Yes, and I was 7, I think. I was like, wow, okay. You know, and I was, some women, you know, would email me when they read the book and criticize that and say, well, I mean, there are other avenues.
No.
And then I said, well, I was only 7. What did I know?
Yeah, right. No, I think it's a real good thing to put in the back of your head if you got any smarts in the real world, because there is a real world that we all don't want to really address. But
that's
so
right.
you that's it. I mean, you got to get real, lady. Your uncle would have hoped you married one of your lovers, Patrick John Anson, the 5th Earl of
course,
Litchfield.
and so would my mother have loved it. Too,
but you didn't.
No, I didn't. And of course, as I say in the book, you know, I mean, he was the 5th Earl of Litchfield, and he had this enormous, I mean, literally a huge stately home in the country with thousands of acres and butlers and, you know, marble ballrooms and so, you know, to the manor born. And really, in those days, he couldn't have married what was called in England a commoner like myself, meaning an ordinary girl who was not from an aristocratic family. But who knows? You know, times had changed, and you know, my mother certainly thought it might. I was in her good books for, you know, a year or two when that was going on. But I mean, I was completely dazzled. You know, when you walk into a house that has sort of canalettos in the hall and, you know, butlers running around, it is very seductive for a nice upper middle class girl from the countryside.
Oh, that's an understatement if ever I've heard one.
I mean, it really was. And of course, I wasn't, you know, I wasn't that comfortable because I didn't really know how you were supposed to. Now, of course, I know that it doesn't matter at all, but, you know, always that's the thing, trying to be someone else and not being who you really are.
Right.
That doesn't work with a man.
But you did marry Hollywood royalty. You married Bill Hayward, the son of movie star Margaret Sullivan, associate producer of Easy Rider. That didn't go well either. And God, what a sad end he had to his life.
Well, he certainly did have a sad end, and I didn't put that in the book because it happened not too long ago.
Right.
He was, you know, it's very hard for children of movie stars to find their way in life because they look at their parents and they can't compete. Very few of them, maybe Michael Douglas is one of the few ones, become actors or producers of any note. It's just they can't do it, and then they feel, you know, lost and failures. And that was the way with Bill Hayward. He didn't really find his way. He wasn't really suited to be a movie producer. He should have done something else. I'm not quite sure what. And at a very early age, of course, he was packed off to what would now literally be called a mental institution for some mild infraction at school about a girl. And it was terrible. It was a time when, you know, psychoanalysis was fashionable, and everybody maybe not everybody, but a lot of people in Hollywood sent their children off to shrinks who then packed them off somewhere, and it absolutely destroyed his life. And really it was because they were too busy doing other things. So it
But
was,
that whole
it was
family,
a tragedy.
it was a tragedy,
Yeah,
but the whole family was riddled with that kind of
The whole
mental
family was
anguish.
tragic. And of course I thought when I married him, well, I can fix him. But of course you can't. I wasn't really the right person to fix him.
Better you fix chateaus than you fix people. People are hard.
Or fix myself.
I hear you, darling. I hear you loudly and clearly. We're all working on that. That's a work in progress. You did find,
that's a work.
Right? I'll tell you. But you found art, and it worked. How come?
But I found out, and this was something, that he was a completely different kind of man that I'd been used to, because he absolutely told me the truth every day about everything that was who I was and what was happening and what I had to face up to, and I was horrified by this. But of course, in a way, it was exactly what I needed, because I'd never confronted who I was or anything. But he was very helpful in a very direct Jewish way that I was not, I hadn't been used to. So it was bumpy, lots of arguments. But also what's interesting is that I hadn't really ever been with a man who was just very kind. I know it sounds sort of corny, but I think that people sort of dismiss kind men as maybe not being very interesting. But it is something that's the one thing my mother told me right here. She said, try and find a kind man. But I thought, well, what does that mean? That sounds boring. But in a way, I think it's true. Someone who actually appreciates who you are for what you are and doesn't mind if you mess up now and again.
It's interesting.
It's a hard thing.
Kindness is key, but you can't have a kind man until you know how to be kind to yourself.
That's right, and how to appreciate kindness.
Right.
It's
that you're worthy of
for
it.
most young. Yes, that you're worthy of. That's right. You have to be able to accept kindness. That's another thing that takes a while. And I think for young women, it also sounds a bit boring.
Right. Exactly. But that's just part of the growing up process. Question for you, which is, you didn't have children, but he has children, I guess, that you sort of helped raise. Are you,
right. Well, they were quite grown up
Oh.
when we got together. They were 15 and 17, so they were already sort of grown up, and I don't think they thought much of me, and I couldn't blame them, frankly. I was the interloper, but I understood that, and so I didn't make too much of it.
You've been together now, how long, you two?
Well, we've been together 30 years.
Yeah, I mean, come on. All my marriages put together aren't 1/30th of that. I mean, I need to spend some time with you.
We're legendary in Hollywood.
Legendary is the understatement. Listen to me. You work things out. It's clear to me by the end of the book that why you wrote it was because you were sharing something of self-realization, which I think is always a wonderful thing to do. And at the end of the day, you have to say to yourself, is anything perfect?
That's right, is anything but then my answer to everything in life was, I'm going to escape, I'm going to go somewhere else, I'm going to leave this man and find something else. And in the end, you just have to stop and see what you have as opposed to what you don't have. And that's a hard lesson to learn, and say, look at what I have, and to be grateful for what you have. And I was always, at the slightest hiccup, running away because I didn't want to face, basically me, maybe changing me to be something else and deal with a relationship.
Not change, reinvent. Listen, the last thing that I want to talk to you about is this. You have the chateau, which he kind of didn't want to get involved with because he was a nice Jewish boy who wanted to stay in L.A. and not go to this foreign planet called France.
That's
and
right.
spend a lot of time.
France, where he didn't speak the language.
Exactly. He wasn't in control there. You can tell him I said so. That's why he wanted to stay in L.A.
That's right, of course.
Right, those men.
You're so right.
But you worked it out and you're still together, and there you are. You've got this beautiful chateau. Everybody's got to go to the website. I'll give it at the end of the show so that you can see this thing. Oh my God, what she's built. What a creative soul you are. But finish this sentence for me, the title of the book, Fiona. Mistakes were made. Fiona, mistakes were made and? The
mistakes were made and I learned to live with them and be happy.
I've been speaking with Fiona Lewis, the author of Mistakes Were Made, Some in French. For more information about Fiona Lewis and her French chateau, visit Fiona's blog at fionasfrenchchateau.com. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a production of Resec LLC. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern. Visit hallicasserjayne.com.